I mean, I gave up everything for this. I mean, you know, my wife is struggling. I'm not a victim. I'm not Jim Comey. It's fine. I did this, and I'm proud I did it. But if you think we're there for tea and crumpets, well, I mean, Cash is there all day. We share it. Our offices are linked. He turns on the faucet. I hear it. He's there he gets in at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't leave till 7 at night. You know, I'm in there at 7:30 in the morning. He uses the gym. I work out in my apartment. But I stare at these four walls all day in D.C., you know, by myself, divorced from my wife. Not divorced, but I mean, separated, divorced. And it's hard. I mean, you know, we love each other, and it's hard to be apart.
But you're doing some great work. You're straightening out the FBI. You're moving buildings. There's a lot of change.
Nice little pep talk there for Dan Bongino, who is on the market, ladies. And I'll just say one quick thing. If you are the point man for clearing the air on Jeffrey Epstein, don't go on national TV telling the world how much of a tough time you're going through. But I'll just say, I'd like to welcome back to the program, David Griscom. Hey, Dave.
How's it going, my friend? Thank you so much for
good to have you
holding
back.
down the fort. I know I missed you, missed everybody. I'm very happy to be back. I had a very productive May, though. Feeling fresh and excited. Feeling good. I mean, much better than Bongino, who seems to be.
Did you ever feel like you're in these four walls and, you know, you exercise, maybe trying to live it up? Sounds like he's in prison.
It was like, you know, I mean, it's so good to be like, you know, one of like to work in the Federal Bureau of Investigations, right? The kind of like secret guy to just not be able to get through your opening interview without admitting multiple times that you're all alone because your wife has left you. I mean, already from the get-go, he's like, you know, I have a lot of room in my apartment.
I have been watching these sorts of interviews professionally for about 10 years. And before that, for a while, I've never seen somebody so gratuitously insert their divorce proceedings into a discussion of how they're. I mean, maybe the question was a little bit suggestive. I would just say, stiff upper lip. What's going on with my family is kind of besides the point for this Murdoch property to be talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, he has had a truly inspiring rise from a humble Secret Service agent all the way up
to a YouTuber. Which is like,
YouTuber.
it's like, I mean, I guess like doing this sort of work, a lot less responsibility than leading the FBI. Imagine it was a lot easier when you could just come in and talk BS about all this stuff.
Make some lemonade. Well, folks, we got a big old show for y'all today. 223 Who Makes the Millions from U.S. war, plus why socialist grocery stores are good. We'll be joined in just a little bit by Alex Jordan and Courtney Rawlings to talk about their new excellent program over at the Quincy Institute. Why is America always at war? We have the links below for everybody to check it out. We get into the military industrial complex, who's been making the money, congressional stock trading, and also we give a little bit of hell to Mr. Chuck Schumer, who's trying to egg on Donald Trump into another conflict in the Middle East.
Taco Trump, everybody. It's what everyone's saying, I guess.
Yeah, it's a big winner. That's a party that seems to be set up for a big victory. I mean, it is. We're going to talk about this, I think, on Sunday for everybody in our bonus episode. We're going to be talking about how the Democratic Party just has absolutely zero strategy for how to not just retake the White House, but maybe to just sort of refine themselves as a political party. Because every single trend for the Democratic Party is going in the opposite direction of what you would want it to be. You know, they are losing across the board when it comes to their traditional base, working class voters, and also voters of color. And it doesn't seem like they have much of a strategy to win them back. And they seem to the one thing that they just keep on doubling down on is the monstrous death drive politics of endless war in the Middle East, endless slaughter in Gaza, and potentially war with Iran. So and also finding ways to line their friends' pockets with millions of dollars to figure out ways to talk to young men, which you can do for free, by the way.
The degree to which we don't have a democracy right now, and that Chuck Schumer video where he's taking on Trump for talking to Iran. that is, he knows that he doesn't have to talk to most people. He's talking
Yeah.
to who he represents, and he said it. I could have. I would be accused of being anti-Semitic if I made up the quote saying Chuck Schumer says his job in the Senate as the leader of the Democrats is to keep the left pro-Israel. He said those explicit words. I am not even like sort of summarizing them in my own terms. That's what he said. And I don't have any reason to believe Hakeem Jeffries is any different with the amount of money he takes. And so we see these people, and like I was saying to David, it's like watching the Washington Generals Harlem Globetrotters game. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
would we expect them to actually try to win this? Like, that's not their job.
I mean, but they're like also all of their training since they've been in politics is to do the exact opposite of what this moment needs, which is actually standing up for everyday people and working class people. And on that, we got a lot we'll be talking about over the next few weeks about the problems of the Democratic Party and also about this extremely dangerous bill that Trump is putting forward that is going to significantly cut and harm millions and millions of Americans. I just wanted to remind folks that this really is the thing that we should be kind of laser focused on. This is probably one of the most critical fights that we're going to be seeing for in the immediate to near future, because it will have such long lasting effects on all of us. You know, for a party that has been talking about how they care about American families, remember that 41% of births in the United States are paid for by Medicaid, a program that they're looking to cut by what, $600 billion and kicking around 10.3 million people off of it. This is a country which, as everybody who's listening to this program already knows, is we're getting sick can literally be a death sentence, can ruin your life forever. And the limited protections that we have for people, the limited safety net that we have for people, they're trying to rip away. Because they want to punish people, because they want to find ways, by the way, to pull more money away from programs that actually help everyday people, and they want to pull that money to line the pockets of their friends and their major donors. I mean, this is clear as day what this is about.
Yeah, and unless you're one of the extremely wealthy at the way top of this, it's penny wise and pound foolish to
Mm-hmm.
think that like you will be served by this even if you're not on Medicaid. Like David said, 40% of births covered by Medicaid. It's closer to 50 when you get to rural areas. Guess what? Those funds help those hospitals continue to run. Once those funds don't go to those hospitals, you lose hospitals. I mean, we're going to be talking about groceries. Like these sorts of this is political economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's crazy that we don't think about these things in broader terms, or even like student loans, whether that money would be better served kept in communities, paying contractors to build houses, or should it just be paid back to banks that were for whatever reason standing between students and education? Like it's disgusting.
And not just to mention Medicaid, but also reminder that like SNAP, like literally, programs that provide people the essence of life, which is food. 42 million people used that program in this country, right? People don't realize, I think, sometimes just how poor and difficult life is for millions and millions and millions of Americans. And from all of these kind of federal cuts that the Trump administration is putting are only going to multiply against all of the horrendous hurdles that have been put up in states like Texas that are making it harder and harder for people to be able to access these kind of programs. So this is like the fight. What they are trying to do is they're trying to not just send us back rhetorically, they are really trying to undo almost all of the progress that we got from the Great Society and from the New Deal here. So this is like when it comes to like politics and being engaged in, calling your elected officials, this is the thing that really people should be putting a lot of pressure on those folks right now, instead of the kind of stupid stuff like Chuck Schumer getting mad that Donald Trump isn't interested enough in war. But we're going to really dive into that in the next couple of weeks here, folks. But before we get to talking about the war machine, before we get to our conversation with Courtney and Alex, I wanted to talk about somebody that people seem to really like. I will say for myself, I seem to like this guy a lot. Zohran in New York City, who's been running for mayor, a really great campaign. And maybe we can talk about some of the things that people really like about this campaign.
Our campaign is surging, and you want to know why? Because the ideas we're fighting for are popular. This month, for example, we got new polling that showed that 2/3 of New Yorkers support city-owned grocery stores, a policy we've championed for months that would guarantee cheaper groceries. But that's not all. A separate poll found 3/4 of New Yorkers support making buses free, like this one. As a state legislator, I won $15 million to fund a first-of-its-kind fare-free bus pilot that led to a 30% increase in weekday ridership and a 38.9% decrease in assaults on bus drivers. Now I'm running on a plan to make every bus fast and free. And finally, this week we found that nearly 80% of New Yorkers agree with my plan to freeze the rent for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants. Politics isn't always that complicated. We're in second place because we're fighting for everyday New Yorkers. So join us at ZohranforNYC.com and win a city that New Yorkers can actually afford.
And I have to say, as important as a lot of the other things we're going to talk about today, I think that this, campaign is probably one of the most important happening in the country right now. Not just because of the stakes of potential Cuomo administration in New York, but also because I think Zohran is showing a different kind of politics. Right? We've played him on this program before. People might remember because I was so inspired and happy to see the videos that he put together after Donald Trump won, where he did something that many liberals, many leftists even are afraid to do, which is went out and spoke to people who voted for Donald Trump and asked them why. This is somebody who actually has like a very serious vision, and I think a commitment to actually listen to people and hear where they are. And as we're seeing through these plans and the people who are sort of coming in and around this campaign, the capacity to be able to like inspire people to fight for a better future instead of just defending things from the constant onslaught from the right. So this is a campaign that we really, really want to see be successful. He talked about all the why it's super popular, but there are some people who aren't very excited about these many plans, right, Matt?
There are. I just want to circle back though to the thing you said about buses and the little insertion there on public safety and how it's been, it's led to less assaults on drivers, I think is at least one of the metrics cited. And that's an important thing because, I do think the left has been open politically, that people that run for office, to a shift in terms of perception of public safety. And it's not just perception. There was a rise during COVID of things like assaults and that sort of thing. And what has changed that, as switched that around, is the social element, which is to say more people are back on the subway, including the rise from the congestion pricing that was ultimately implemented. More people on the trains has led to safer commutes. And that would have the same effect on buses stands to reason. And when there's fewer people on buses, then this is kind of common sense to anyone who's used public transportation. The only time I'm ever worried is when it's 3 a.m. and I'm on with one other person and they're acting erratically, right? You have more people doing this than there's safety in numbers, literally. That's not just, so I liked that emphasized. But yes, there are certain people upset about this. And one of these guys goes by the name of The Rich. Which nice. I didn't make these people up for those purposes of this investigation here. It says, wait until this guy finds out the profit margin of grocery stores is around 3% now. I had a response to this that kind of confused a large amount of people that didn't know where I was coming from. So let's just put this up here. I said, yeah, dumbass, that's why you can't leave running them to capitalists. And I got a response here. I can't tell if you think 3% is too high or too low from Spencer Gray. There just really isn't that much juice to squeeze in groceries. Capitalists aren't extracting that much surplus at that level. Not the point, buddy, because the actual point is this is market failure. This is capitalism failing to deliver on what it is trusted by people like you to deliver, which is, in this case, groceries. There's a reason that polling is so severe. It's 2-1 in favor of this. It's because New York has a high need for supermarkets. And the people that are in rich neighborhoods, or actually some of those people probably don't even live in New York, don't give a shit about that. But it overlaps highly with poverty and rate of food hardship. This is just simple. There is a failure already happening. right? And people want to point to me to the Khrushchev Nixon, meeting when Nixon was vice president. That says like, oh, look at how impressed they are with our supermarkets, brother. My supermarket don't look like that one. Okay, I like my supermarket because I can walk to it, but it ain't looking like that. Okay. Like I gotta walk quite a ways before one looks that nice and that stocked, and where I don't need to check the meat really fucking well. Okay, like you can fantasize that we live in Nixon's world still. We do not. We live in a world where people have trouble finding groceries because capitalists can't deliver on that.
Look, I mean, let's get into some of this here, because this is one of those moments where what Zohran is talking about is actually like something that government used to be able to do, right? You think about something like the electrification of the South. Private companies said, hey, we don't need to give electricity to those hillbillies. We'll never be able to get a return of our investment. Well, FDR says, well, that seems to be a problem. So we will come up with a model that will work. Sometimes the government will do it, like the Tennessee Valley Authority, or work to, help out, small cooperatives, meet that need. But we're going to make sure that everybody in the United States of America can turn on a light bulb in their house, right? That was just like the kind of civic mindedness that we used to have in this country that has completely disappeared. Now, on the question of grocery stores in particular, this is a moment where there are plenty of places where it is easy to get very nice produce to be able to get groceries, and there are also places across New York City in particular where it is difficult. And this point that they're trying to make to you, Matt, is like, whoa, it's hard to make a profit in grocery stores. Is exactly why sometimes you need the government to be able to come in and to provide services where the free market is failing and unable to make it. So again, if it is one of those things where, the profit margin is too low, well, what option does a capitalist have, to make up that? Well, they raise prices. Problem is that a supermarket exists in a physical location, which means that it's going to have to be affordable and operate for the people who live around you. Well, if you start raising the prices to extremely high New York prices, I mean, I've seen some of the egg prices and food prices in certain parts of New York. Well, that's not going to be affordable for people who live in working class neighborhoods in New York. So having the government come in and say, hey, we don't have a need to make profit on these kind of things. We can organize and be able to utilize our city money to be able to sort of absorb these costs of doing business. Why not? Now, here are the actual arguments that will be made against that actually have some credence to them, right? One is that you don't want it to be a situation where you are just kind of bleeding money for an inferior project, right? So the idea being that city-run grocery stores are just going to be unprofitable forever. Well, the fact of the matter is that, first off, that private grocery stores are unprofitable for the first few years, right? That's why you invest money up front, and it sometimes takes a few years for these kind of things to get off of the ground. Government's a really nice thing because it can actually invest and hold on to that kind of investment much longer than a private capitalist would, because capitalists will run out of money, or their investors will start saying, hey, we don't want to be involved in this anymore. The government actually has the capability and the capacity to hold on and maintain investment in an area for longer. Two, we were talking about some of the low profitability in the grocery stores. One of the nice things that Zohran has proposed is that these city-owned grocery stores would get a good deal from the government. They wouldn't have to pay property taxes. And if they were able to be used on city-owned land or empty lots, they would do that as well. So already we see a massive overhead cut into the grocery store business model that could generate lower prices for everyday folks and mean that it's not so much cost upon upon those city-run grocery stores. The last one is a very good point, and this is something that has happened throughout the American throughout American history when it comes to kind of cooperatively run organizations or even state-owned enterprises, is remembering that there is an entire supply chain that goes into these kind of things. And the worry is that a city-run grocery store would not be able to get the favorable prices that from wholesalers that some of the big stores have. And this is something that is actually a fundamental issue in American grocery stores, even dropping, city-run, community-run, county-run grocery stores, is the fact of the matter is that's why you don't see independent grocery stores in this country anymore, is because Walmart and Kroger and those big grocery stores have specific deals with food producers and food companies where they get a lower price than what everyone else pays. And this is one of the big reasons why we have seen so much consolidation in that industry. Well, the fact of the matter is New York is not a small place, and this is not a small plan. So they would absolutely have the same capacities to be able to entice sellers to be able to sell to them. And the only way that they wouldn't would be is if those sellers were operating in bad faith, literally saying, we want this program to fail. So we won't negotiate, right? And that is something where I think somebody like Zohran or somebody engaged in politics, would have to have the capacity and the courage to come out and say, like, look, these capitalists are actually trying to rig the game because they are uninterested in having a good life for everyday folks. They don't want people to be able to have affordable groceries, right? And you would actually have to be able to put political pressure on them, which is an advantage that you have, by the way, as a popularly elected official versus, I don't know, like a small town grocer who's going up against the big box stores.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's one city that can do this, because it really does take economies of scale, I think, to really compete here, it's New York City,
Yeah.
right? New York fucking city. There's also an antitrust here that I found kind of persuasive. Just really quickly, there's an Atlantic piece, which I loathe to always share, but the Great Grocery Squeeze. This is basically predicated on this work, but here it goes into the Robertson-Patman Act. That's that Wright Patman from Texas. But the idea was basically policy shift that decimated local grocery stores. It's an interesting piece because it points out that in the 90s when they started talking about food deserts, it was sort of a new thing. And part of this is because we've let the major companies just get huge. About, right? Exactly. Yeah. And in part because and it's funny, like Trump all of a sudden looks back to like laws passed by John Adams to like go after political enemies in this country. This law is still on the books that would say, hey, if you sell, say, one thing to Whole Foods, you have to give independent grocers the same deal on that. You can't give the big guys the deal because ultimately then they're going to destroy the smaller companies. And we just don't. And Lena Khan, there's some talk about Lena Khan revitalizing that. But ultimately, like, this needs to be a part of how business is done. But we don't enforce it because who gives a fuck about that stuff anymore? And you see, this is inequality. This is, and to the extent that these sorts of giant corporations are the only way to efficiently do this, then we should have national control over them.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think it's kind of as simple as that. And I think in general, a municipal run grocery system, I think it's something worth fighting for. I think ideally you'd have these things be federally or state run at the largest possible scale. One of the things is that when we take out the profit motive, when we take out private interest, we get to talk about social good. And that's how you would judge something like a city-run grocery store. It's like, how much food is it providing for people? What are the better health outcomes for folks? I mean, there's been a lot of fucking talk from the right wing now about, they don't like snacky foods, right? They don't want Frito-Lays in high schools or at bodegas or whatever. Well, this is a great opportunity to put your money where your mouth is. If you want people to eat better food, fresher produce, support Zohran and his campaign for mayor. I think that this is a really exciting thing, and I think that there should be a lot more talk about solutions like this, which I think are creative, they're inspiring, and they get people engaged in a way much, much more mobilizing and motivating than Chuck Schumer kind of sitting and muttering to himself in a chair about going to war with Iran.
It's a new future. I mean, I know you saw in the research, there's one in Baldwin, Florida.
We talked about. Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah. And, they've ultimately went under because guess what? They were trying to do something that a private grocery store also couldn't do. And they don't have the economies of scale. Like, right, Baldwin, Florida. No, you need that to be a statewide or at least a giant municipality like Miami or someone, because again, like this economies of scale, state power, right? This isn't just it's not. Yeah. But I mean, I also obviously appreciate the effort and the people that were able to get groceries there for a half decade longer than they would have. Were well served.
And look, and there's the one what I believe in Erie, Kansas, that's still functioning. This is something that works. This is something that's happened throughout American history. And it's just, I mean, I have a kind of historical example about like the populists back in the day, but they sort of went through this too, is sort of recognizing that like, these ideas have merit, right? For them, it was the exchanges, right? The idea that like the cotton conglomerates basically have too much power. So if we can organize ourselves as like a collective, as the farmers who sell cotton, we can get an advantage. The problem is that when they were doing on a kind of local level, they could always get undermined by someone else, or literal capital boycotts. Like they would say, we won't buy from these kind of left-wing groups. They realized that politically what they had to do was to have these things be run on the mass scale, right, on the state level. And this ends up becoming a big thing with the nonpartisan league in North Dakota and all this kind of stuff. So the point that I'm getting at is not that like, oh, well, because if you try this in a very specific area, and it works, by the way, for a few years until the sellers decide that they want to wage war on these kind of systems, doesn't mean that they're debunked now. It means that like, oh yeah, it does seem like you probably need to be able to have an investment. You do need to have scale, just like anything that you do. I don't know. It's like those kind of nitpicky. Nitpicky isn't even the right word, because they're bad faith. Because anyone who's serious about this, I will accept. For example, if you want to argue against these things, that like, yeah, sourcing will be an issue. You're going to have to figure out how to deal with the big retailers to do that. I get that. I think that's a real thing. I think Zohran does as well, because he's not just talking out of his ass about this. They're actually talking about a plan. Those are real critiques, right? That doesn't mean that they're right. Those are like fair things to talk about. Fucking talking about Baldwin, after years of operating and then failing after the pandemic, when there was a massive grocery crisis across the United States of America.
Everywhere is getting us hosed.
It's not serious. It's not serious.
Like this country is a joke when it comes to groceries. People have to go to fucking dollar stores in strip malls. It is a shame, and it should be. And all of this is just propaganda to try to like tell ourselves a nice story about it, so we don't have to actually do anything. And like, yeah, some of those people, look, if you fundamentally don't give a fuck that people in like a lot of neighborhoods can't get groceries, and you're worried about tax dollars, like, yeah, fine, you're not on the team. Good luck to you. But like, good luck.
Well, also they're in the minority. And this is the biggest thing is like, hey, y'all can fucking complain to yourself, and you guys can start a lot of chat rooms about how right you are and how much you hope that grandma can't get a carrot. But the rest of us are very excited about plans like this, and we're going to fight as hard as we can to put them into practice.
Yep.
Folks, we got a lot more to get to, so I think we got to get to it. As much as I'd love to keep on this, I'll just say, I know our audience is smart and already engaged, but if you aren't already, this is something you should check out. They've already raised enough money, so donating's not even a question at this point. See if there's a way to get involved, or if anything, just spread the word, because I think seeing this, and hopefully seeing this invigorate some kind of municipal level politics that's bold like this, I think would be a really great thing. Because you see, there's a reason that this guy is number 2, and it's because he's talking about things like this that every fucking consultant and even I think well-meaning progressive who would be scared of ever being criticized for being quote unquote impractical or bold or whatnot. Hopefully this actually inspires some people to start doing that in their area as well.
Could not be more pronounced that the sort of standard progressives are stuck in the mud. Trying to get any traction again, and it's Zohran who is outperformed definitely in their projections when they started this.
Well, let's get over this conversation with Courtney and Alex. I highly suggest people check out their program. There are links for everyone to do that below. And then Matt and I have some really radical stuff coming for you on the other side. You're not going to want to miss it. So enjoy the conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. My name is David Griscom, and I am thrilled to be joined by both Courtney and Alex. Y'all might remember Courtney. We had her on the program a few months ago to talk about motherhood, childcare, her piece in Damage Magazine. But today we'll be talking about war and who makes money from it, who is pushing for it, and all of that messy business. But Courtney and Alex, thank y'all so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
We're so excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you all on here. And before we get into some of these topics, could y'all just briefly tell us about y'all's new project, Always at War?
Yeah. So Alex and I had a crazy idea to try and kind of like get the Quincy message out. And for those of you who are not familiar with Quincy, Quincy is a DC think tank, but unlike 99.9% of DC think tanks, we are actually pushing for a kind of world without, war, or where war is not the first option that we go to, and for more peace. And that's a difficult line to get across in DC, because there's so many reasons. So many of our think tanks, for instance, are funded by Pentagon contractors, foreign governments who have their own interests, weapons manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. And so how do you kind of explain what sets Quincy apart, but also get our own stories apart? You kind of have to lay out the land. And it turns out that one way to do that is to kind of go step by step and explain to people, why is the U.S. always at war? And that's what the new show is called. It's called Always at War. And each episode, we're kind of trying to take that question moment by moment and say, like, why is he always at war? Well, maybe it's because think tanks are funded by weapon manufacturers. Why is the U.S. always at war? Maybe it's because, a majority of our Congress people are making money off, weapons trades, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the pieces that y'all put out so far have been really interesting, and there'll be links below for people to check them out. And one of the things I wanted to talk to y'all a little bit about was about like the money side of the American war machine. And it's one of those things that like you see this in pop culture and in music. Like there is this kind of generalized understanding in America that like, oh, somebody's making a lot of money off of this conflict. Yeah. But it would be interesting to sort of, look under the hood a little bit. And maybe we could start by something that y'all talked about recently, which is how much money Congress people make from the stock market, and maybe sort of tie that into like how directly does that tie into like the American war machine?
Totally. So this most recent episode, we took a look at the 50 plus members of Congress who trade military stocks. And I believe in 2024, Courtney is like 113 million's worth, up to that amount. So not like chump change. And, there are all of these incentives and structures that push America towards war. But we thought it was interesting to look at a very base one, which is, you go to work and you get to vote or give speeches about U.S. military policy. And how that policy is constructed, like directly relates to you and your family's bottom line, because you own stock in Boeing or Raytheon or Honeywell or any of the number of DoD contractors out there. And so this is just like the most baseline acute version of self-interest getting in the way of like reasonable foreign policy, which is that if these members of Congress were to vote to shrink the defense budget, if they were to even go out and talk about their interest in maybe thinking about one day slashing a little bit of the Pentagon spending, all the money that we send, almost it's going to be $1 trillion this year. If they even talk about that, even entertaining that idea might make their family less well off.
Actually, I think that's a really good point, and maybe just like talking about that mechanism. Why would that be a bad thing? It would be because the stocks of some of these defense contractors and just anybody who is involved with a large S of the American war machine, right? They would see a devaluation in their stock price. That's what you're getting at, right? So it's not just like, oh, cutting contracts. It's just like, oh, if people feel like the world is a little safer, right? That's bad for business for these folks.
Right, which makes warmongering literally profitable, right? So, if the people that we see on the news, but also our own Congress people, seem to always be, someone has to be the enemy, right? Say it's like China one week, this week it's Iran. That means we can maybe boost up those Pentagon contracts. It means next year, maybe it'll be 1.5 trillion, who knows? And that only boosts stock opportunities. And what's so fun, it's almost funny saying this because it's such an open secret, but just laying it out is like so not to sound so Gen Z, but like very cringe. Like the people who are sitting on the Defense Appropriations Committee themselves openly own stocks in places, like Boeing, Lockheed, etc. And so they're, kind of laying the groundwork for the, the Pentagon spending, or, how we're going to posture ourselves militarily. And at the same time, like literally raking it in. So there's never been to me so far at my time at Quincy, never been such an obvious conflict of interest. And there are so many conflicts of interest that we look at every week. So it's almost comical.
Has it always been this bad? I mean, is this something that has gotten worse? Because, it seems like such a naked form of, I'll put my own spin on it, like corruption, and a serious conflict of interest, that, you think there might have been some kind of movement in the past to sort of address it, but it seems like this has been kind of the norm in DC for a long time, at least my entire life.
It definitely goes back to Eisenhower, Alex. What do you want to?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like a long-standing issue, right? Like the military-industrial complex, like corrupting influence in the halls of government, or however Eisenhower put it. But I do think there's something to be said for it having been supercharged, particularly post 9/11 and the global war on terror. There's a whole long history of who used to make our weapons, and then those industries consolidating after neoliberal reform and globalization, and we got down to the big five companies, and then now there's the fight for AI and Silicon Valley to get more money. But point being, these companies have really built out intentionally this structure of making sure the defense budget keeps going up and up, and particularly post global war on terror, when the US had this whole new justification. After there was a moment there after the end of the Cold War, we weren't exactly sure who our enemy was. And then we definitely knew after 9/11, our enemy was terrorism, was the people who hate our freedom, et cetera, et cetera. And so there was like a whole new, not only new, DHS and all of these government surveillance structures, but also this whole new military rationale for building new platforms, new equipment, all this stuff. And as these investments increased, because there was these endless justifications for bombing Libya, for bombing Yemen, bombing Syria, you name it. These companies got to work. The military industrial complex on average hires at least 700 lobbyists every year. So that's, more than one for every member of Congress. I believe in 2024, it was like 945. Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, just like a few. But like that, so they have the lobbyists, they hire people like, former chair of the China Select Committee, Mike Gallagher, gets hired by a company like Palantir to help open the doors and grease the skids for conversations about investments in Palantir's military technology and increasing their defense acquisitions, et cetera. But there's also this very real. Sorry, I'd lost my train of thought there.
Like I assume you're going towards like the revolving door stuff. So I mean, it's pretty blatant. So like of those 945 lobbyists, the majority of them are coming from, the halls of Congress or the Pentagon or they are K-Street. Just like they're in those DC circles. So there are laws that are supposed to prohibit these blatant conflicts of interest. The laws are pretty flexible. Yeah. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, like you can get away with not registering as a lobbyist by being a senior advisor at one of these companies or whatever. So they find all these avenues. And I remember what I was going to say. I think one of the obvious examples of like intentional structuring, like making it harder for members of Congress or the US state to like pull back on military investments is the F-35, which is like a failed plane. It can only like fly the missions it's assigned to 50% of the time. Now, that plane, a part of it is built in every single state in America. All 50 states have a jobs program for the F-35. So if any individual senator were to be like, maybe we shouldn't keep building this $2 trillion, continue this program, which has cost is going to cost US taxpayers $2 trillion. Maybe we shouldn't continue it. They have a attack ad waiting for them that's saying this guy is attacking jobs in our state. So like they've been very intentional in like political incentives, financial incentives, all the different reasons that these members of Congress have to not ask many questions when it comes to like, hey, we should spend more than $1 trillion on war. We should spend even more than that. Like there's nothing pointing in the other direction meaningfully from like a material standpoint.
Well, and I think it's notable that like there's kind of like two poles that are happening, at least with like the military industrial complex in the US, right? Is that like one, for example, like we do need like kind of like federal jobs program, right? And we should have like projects that are happening in every community, maybe not building, inefficient,
preferably not building the 35,
but there's like a need for this kind of thing, and it's been missing for a long time in this country. And people sort of we talked a lot in this program like the weakness of the American state to be able to sort of do big projects. This has been, I think, like the defining aspect of our life. But like the one part that they still do it is in kind of weapons and in military industrial complex stuff. But then on the second side, there's also this mass privatization effort going on those programs as well. I mean, could you talk about like, these are two poles that are happening. We were talking about a little bit of the political side where it's difficult for Congress people to sort of talk about pushing back against like weapons manufacturing, all this kind of stuff in the US. But now there is significant private incentive, not just to kind of sell things to the government, but to do things that at one time, like the United States military had been doing in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think they say like the only part of America that gets like any form of centralized government planning is the military, right? Whether you're talking about the VA or you're talking about how Pentagon contracts work. But the reality is this is compared to other kinds of spending, if you are of the left persuasion, if you're a fellow traveler, you might see the connection between like government spending, like well-planned, centrally planned, in creating like jobs or like, a form of Keynesianism, if you're like believing in that stuff. The military Keynesianism is a shitty job creator. Like it creates far less jobs than if the same amount of government spending on healthcare and education. But it's all we got. It's like it's the one thing that the government like will still be like, yeah, of course, this is a common good. There are not many other common goods that we still acknowledge in American life, but the F-35, which drops bombs on kids, that's certainly benefiting all of us. And so, there is that one sector of the like public investment that we still all believe in Washington, apparently. And then there's so many private incentives. And Courtney, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about the Silicon Valley of it all, but like, Palantir, Shield AI.
Can you tell me what those people do at Palantir?
Oh my God. Besides put out really dope commercials.
That's the main job, right?
I mean, it's I took my words away. But so to the question of like how or why so much of the military industrial complex is privatized, I mean, it does go back, I only have my history really goes back to World War II for this military industrial stuff. So even then, we had already privatized so much of at least who makes our weapons. And I think that is what incentivizes the Pentagon budget to grow and grow infinitely. Like if people, especially like we talked about the revolving door, if the people working in government have a promise for bigger paychecks later, and the weapons contractors are making bigger paychecks because the Congress people are helping them, there's this handshake agreements that are also financial agreements, right? There's just a lot of incentive to put more and more money behind the Pentagon. And those contractors can ask for larger and larger sums of money. There's a huge amount of cost inflation. And I think what the Silicon Valley is seeing is, there's plenty of money to go around here, because there's really no top limit on how much we can spend on war. I don't know why. I think, right, it comes back to these financial incentives.
It's also like the biggest buyer. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but it's like it's an incredible customer to have for your tech company. Yeah.
Well, that's definitely why Silicon Valley is all of a sudden finding themselves in here, right? And all of a sudden they're writing whole books about why, or that was Anderson Horowitz actually. So there's the whole VC of it all, but they're they're really invested in finding new threats that are now can only be solved by software, can only be solved by kind of newfangled weaponry. And that's right, because there is no top limit to how much we're willing to spend on weapons. And I think Alex kind of pointed to this, right? Like, to the public, they use these, endless explanations like, oh, it's a job creator, it's trickle down, there are real threats like, oh my God, China is going to bomb us at any moment. We've got to be the strongest, country out there, et cetera, et cetera. And that just allows them to just throw money at these private corporations. So there's a huge benefit to this kind of posture we take with the public, which is like, threats are always looming. Terrorism was a great example, actually, right? Because terror isn't a country. It's not a people. It's a fucking vibe. And so all of a sudden, right, we see the Pentagon budget skyrocket to like, new heights we never saw coming. And I think like terrorism as like a pressing threat, I think more and more Americans are like kind of growing sick of that as like a real threat. And so all of a sudden now it's like, it's China, it's Russia's great, submarines. And so I think what people like Palantir are seeing is that's a huge opportunity. Terrorism, that's done. Now let's say like it's China, let's say it's Iran's nuclear projects. That's a new reason to invest in our softwares because, software will save us. Or I think that's literally one of their taglines.
Well, I mean, it's frightening, and I'll tell you, I mean, it'll save something. It'll save their bottom line, because one of the things that's really frustrating about, like, even if we might disagree with like the weapons manufacturing programs and things like that, like there's a job in Iowa for like a lot of people to like, build something. There in software, in tech, it's a very, very concentrated industry. It actually does not employ that many people. In the direct production of those goods and services.
And that's their pitch to the U.S. government. Like what you just said is like, don't you hate like having to spend so much on these like legacy systems that require a whole, different supply chain all across? Like they are okay with building more drones and seeing less jobs on the back end because these are not the same companies that rely on these big legacy contracts, these $2 trillion contracts. So they're happy to disrupt, quote unquote, the industry, but like they're not the first people to promise that like they have a better idea about war. Like in Vietnam, it was the electronic battlefield. In the GWAT, it was drones and over the horizon strikes. Now it's like AI and like better drones and like cheaper drones. And like we keep making these promises that like this will finally sort of secure America's superposition in the world. And we can all stop worrying about it and go back to 1991 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, as long as that number goes up, I mean, that's the thing that is funny is that like, there isn't really, political push, from politicians to sort of portray a safer world. But there is a kind of pitch or push from them to say, like, if we do raise our spending, the world will become safer, right? There is no side of it that it's like, oh, you know what? Those threats are gone. We don't have to deal with the Soviet Union. We don't have to deal with, global terrorism or whatever. We can sort of start rolling back. It's like, no, here's the next thing. Yeah. Talking about the next thing, because I want to get to this a little bit. I mean, this has been part of American politics. I think all of our lives, but it's pretty amazing to see how bad the Democrats have been, I think, at messaging around Trump, particularly like on war. And for people who, haven't been following, Trump is trying to renegotiate, might be pushing a little bit, the Iran nuclear deal that he tore up, right? And for people who don't remember, this was, a big achievement from the Obama administration because it sort of was able to sort of push back against the tensions in the region. But people forget that it was an extremely punitive deal. It was extremely punitive to Iran. Iran accepted concessions that most nations wouldn't. So Iran had already sort of taken a tough deal under Obama, and then Trump just ripped it up for no real reason other than to just sort of tarnish Obama's legacy. I don't know. That's part of like what Trump 1 was all about. What was really shocking was the fact that under Biden, they don't do anything to renegotiate something from the administration he was a part of. right?
Well, are you telling me Jake Sullivan isn't the most effective national security advisor you've ever seen? Come on now.
I can't. But Trump has been negotiating this, and there's been some talk that they might allow. Which, by the way, I don't want to get like too into the weeds of like the actual negotiations, because there's one I think is going to probably change by the time this might even come out. But there's this push from some people to say Iran can't enrich any uranium for nuclear power production, which is just absurd. It is a line that I just don't think that it is not a serious actual proposal. It's a hardline, fanatical proposal. And there's been some talk that maybe Trump will accept lower levels of enrichment from Iran. And this is how Mr. Schumer, the great political commentator and presentator that he is, responds.
When it comes to negotiating with the terrorist government of Iran, Trump's all over the lot. One day he sounds tough, the next day he's backing off. And now, all of a sudden, we find out that Witkoff and Rubio are negotiating a secret side deal with Iran. What kind of bull is this? They're going to sound tough in public and then have a side deal that lets Iran get away with everything? That's outrageous. We need to make that side deal public. Any side deal should be before Congress and, most importantly, the American people. If Taco Trump is already folding, the American public should know about it. No side deals.
I feel like I'm going to have an aneurysm. The taco of it all, like, I can't anymore. Like, it's made my day horrible. I really can't with taco.
I mean,
first of all, that would win me over if I was in Washington. Okay, taco Trump. I love taco. Yeah, well, no, I mean, like, I would be like, I'd go for Trump. You don't want to associate him with something delicious. That's not a winning strategy.
No, I don't think. And again, like, this is the thing: is that people just, when they see these things, this is a big part of like the authenticity problem of the Democrats. It's like, this is supposed to be, this is what Chuck Schumer is like behind the scenes, and it does not really inspire a lot of confidence. But I mean, could y'all talk about like this mentality from somebody like Schumer, how dangerous it is? I mean, what is it that he's trying to push here? Is this somebody who is trying to use strength to maybe make the world safer by this, or is this a kind of a dangerous thing to be pushing Trump into a corner on?
Well, I think you made a very good point that this is emblematic of sort of how Democrats have completely lost their way on foreign policy. I mean, which implies that they ever had their way, which I don't want to stick in that position. But like Schumer, he was not a fan of Obama's original nuclear deal. And so it's not terribly surprising that he is going to, come out swinging on this. But I do think watching that video, it's like, it shows they have learned no lessons from Trump winning and Trump campaigning, like both the first time and the second time, regardless of how he governed. He did tell people and try and win votes by being like, I'm anti-war, like I'm reluctant to do these things. I'm not saying that that's how he governed, particularly the first time around, but he definitely said that. And American voters are not as hawkish as Democrats like to imagine, particularly on the Iran deal. Like overwhelming majority of Democrats, like 70+% would support the U.S. negotiating a deal to limit the Iranian nuclear program. But Schumer here, he goes the Trump acts tough, but then he goes and strikes a secret deal with the mullahs line. Like that is who are you talking to? Like you are talking to
who is he talking to there?
Himself, his friends, like not.
Because the thing about Schumer is
Israel?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a kind of like direct way too. It's like people are going to misunderstand what I'm saying here. Schumer definitely benefits like financially from this. He gets lots of donations from these kind of organizations. But when it comes, he's not like a Nancy Pelosi in terms of like how much money he's been getting from it. Don't get me wrong. Well off, fine, taken care of kind of fella.
Yeah. I think AIPAC guys alone gives him quite a hand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just saying to his campaigns, but I think that Schumer actually has like a political ideological like fanaticism.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Issue that goes beyond just like he's this is going to help me out and get this kind of.
Well, David, have you seen that quote where he's like, "My job is to keep the left pro-Israel"? He said that in an interview somewhat recently.
I like it to imagine Chuck Schumer really thinks of himself as part of the left.
Yeah, definitely.
They all do, though. I mean, this is something that you have to remember. They really do think.
I think it's like my biggest pet peeve. Like in history. I'm like, no, I'm not one of you.
Don't get it twisted. But you're totally right that this comes out of like a genuine conviction. I mean, that's a important part of the story of the always at war story that I don't know that we've gotten into yet is, I used to work in politics. I mean, I guess I still sort of do, but I used to work like on the Hill for the Democratic senator, and I used to be in the campaign apparatus and all that stuff. You don't meet many people like no matter how ghoulish their policies are, they all think they're changing the world for the better. True conviction is like a real thing here. And I think Schumer thought he looked cool as hell saying that's bull. That you're gonna strike a secret deal with Iran. And we all agree Iran's the scariest thing happening to you in your neighborhood right now, right? Like not being able to afford food or healthcare or whatever. Like it's just where they stand. It's what animates them. I think that's like a perfectly reasonable read to see them spending their time on this as true belief. And what's fascinating is Trump's yet again ability to just like totally remake whatever the Republican position is into his own. You have these hawks like Lindsey Graham or whatever that basically, I mean, they're the ones pushing, you mentioned this like poison pill effectively of like no enrichment, which is not a deal that Iran will accept. We know this for the decades of trying to negotiate this with them. If you say no nuclear enrichment, they walk away. There's no deal. And that's the reason that, all of these Republican hawks are like attaching to this as the demand for Trump. But there's, reporting suggesting this most recent offer is, figuring out sort of a way to thread the needle so he can say there's no enrichment. It's like enrichment but done by other countries within Iran. But long story short, like Trump, just by virtue of being like, like instead of tearing up the JCPOA and like assassinating Qasem Soleimani, like what if this time we just did a Iran deal, like part 2? And just by virtue of him wanting to do it and like the power of the unitary executive, it seems like Republicans might fall in line, which would be like an objectively good thing for like avoiding a broader war in the Middle East. And there was a Ynet report, I believe it's an Israeli newspaper yesterday, that was like some like perfidious individuals in the Trump administration are like tricking him and suggesting that Israel is trying to drag the US into a war with Iran. And it's like, okay, it sounds like somebody is like, doing Trump a solid and like telling him what's up.
I mean, for people who don't follow this super closely, I think most Americans have a vague understanding that like there's some kind of worry of like Iran getting a weapon, but they might not realize the role of Israel in sort of trying to make this like an American fascination, and particularly Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, he's somebody who's actually spent his entire career actually trying to get people worked up about Iran producing a nuclear weapon. And I do just want to remind people that there is a country in the Middle East that has a secret nuclear weapons program. I actually have a good clip, if y'all don't mind me sharing it real quick, of Mehdi Hassan with Ehud Omer from 2015, talking about this very issue when they were first pushing the first Iran nuclear deal.
Nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons, hundreds of them. So isn't it a bit hypocritical to be lecturing other countries in the region which don't have nuclear weapons on the subject of nuclear weapons?
This is a provocative question because I don't remember that Israel has ever admitted that we have...
Well, you admitted it in December 2006 on a German TV interview. You accidentally admitted it.
No.
Okay, well, let me ask you now. Does Israel have nuclear weapons?
No. By the way, this is a former prime minister of this country. For people who don't know, just be like, I don't know. I mean, it is. I have to say, for a country that has had such influence over American politics and global politics, it is incredible how terrible their PR.
It's not unlike the U.S. in that way.
Nuclear weapons, it does, doesn't it?
But let me. I will not answer this question, Mr. Hassan.
So that's a yes then, right?
Which I think is significant in this context. No, that means exactly what I said before, that we never admitted that we have, and I don't want to...
Everyone in the world knows Israel has nuclear weapons, Mr. Olmert. Everyone knows. You know it, I know it, everybody watching knows.
Well, sometimes everyone in the world knows more than the Prime Minister of Israel. That's also possible. But I want to say this, if you will allow me.
Oh my God.
I say this. Whether Israel has or doesn't have, And I said, I will not refer to it. I don't remember that Israel ever threatened to liquidate another country. Now, Iran keeps saying it all the time to the state of Israel.
And obviously, there is a kind of distinct dark irony about one, what was happening when he was in power, and two, certainly what is happening today.
Yeah, I can think of a place that Israel has been shown some interest in liquidating. Like, what the hell? That's an insane.
I think might have successfully, basically, leveled. So, yeah, this is what I think Alex and I are also kind of interested, right? Like we talked about Chuck Schumer being a quote unquote true believer. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that that's not true. I think intentions are funny things though. In his mind, I think he definitely does quote unquote, truly believe that, the threat of Iran is real and it's pressing and it's has something to do with America. Unclear what, but there are ideological and financial and other pressing incentives that he may or may not be aware are forming, right? Those true beliefs. And it is part of this kind of messy entanglement that anyone who enters into DC is suddenly mired in. It would be difficult to make an argument that Chuck Schumer isn't actually speaking on behalf of, the Israeli government and their interests. I actually think he would admit that, right? Because he thinks like U.S. and Israeli interests are intertwined. And this is what's making it kind of hard to stand by the Democrats. I mean, it's always hard to stand by the Democrats as so far as I've been like an adult, but there are increasingly more Republicans who are openly anti-war, more open to things like diplomacy than there are Democrats. Mm-hmm. That's not a good sign, and they're true believers, right? Maybe not anti-war might be a little strong, but restrainers or realists, or they're pushing for a kind of American first policy, which is to kind of pull back from American primacy everywhere all the time. Where's the Democrat on that issue? I don't see them.
Well, how much of it do you think is the fact that the Democratic Party's kind of brand is return to the old order, right? Like, let's get the adults back in charge, right? And the old order was, kind of endless war, low military budgets. I mean, that's a big part of that part of American history that they want to return to.
That's got to be a lot of it, right? Like, I mean, I remember, there was a real failure to reckon with in the moment, like the reality of Obama's foreign policy. He did some good stuff, delisting Cuba and the Iran deal, some of the things, but he also massively increased the global war on terror, stayed in Iraq, all of these things. And there was no, I think,
excuse me, he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Excuse me, all comments retracted. But like these, I don't remember in real time there being the conversation about like Obama droned the Yemeni wedding, but like that kind of became like a bit of a meme, like Obama as a, the continuation of the imperial streak much, much later on. But Democrats themselves, I cannot think of a public reckoning beyond a handful of members, like often from the Squad, CPC side. Those are the folks who will speak out with some consistency on just a militarized logic. But beyond that, like,
and they're left on an island, and they're truly demonized for voicing those opinions ever.
Totally,
and really threatened, right, by when they run for office, for instance, especially without those big Pentagon contractors backing them. It's hard to win a race on a maybe not be an empire today America line. And it threatens their ability to remain in Washington.
Well, and it threatens, exactly, because I mean, multiple Squad members got primaried, right? Yeah. With support to their opponents by AIPAC, and that's directly, obviously related to their foreign policy views. So there's like, again, all of these wins blowing people away from like trying to come to grips with this stuff.
You know, I'm just going to say this last thing and get y'all's thoughts on it, and then we're going to run. But, you know, I think that I'm curious what y'all think about this as people who've been paying a lot of attention to the American empire, to military spending, and all this stuff. There's been this kind of argument for a long time in most of my life that, you know, Americans don't, quote, like care at all about foreign policy. And I think that one thing that we have seen, particularly in this past year, is that no, that a lot of people really do care. Yeah. If not so much about like all of the ins and outs and the details, like people don't like to see, you know, the violence and the destruction and the genocide we're seeing in Gaza. And more than anything, people don't like the idea of America always being at war. It's something that is just universally unpopular. And the fact that for a long time, both political parties just were unable to really speak to that, I think shows that the lack of imagination and understanding was not so much in the American people, but in the American politicians.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think what you'll find listening to our show for education is there's a lot of sick and pretty like alarming reasons why politicians are very unlikely to change their tune anytime soon. It is simply too profitable. It is simply too tempting. It is simply the thing that keeps you in power to keep these wars going. There are domestic repercussions, right? You know, terrorism sure got us into like over 76 countries, Alex?
And it's we're counterterrorism operations in 73 countries.
73 countries, right?
2023, yeah.
You know, so we're spread pretty thin all over the globe. Well, we're not spread thin. We're spread all over the globe. And then those, you know, things that we call foreign policy slowly creep into our domestic policies and tend over time, especially post 9/11, to take away more and more of the public's ability to have any say or sway over those politicians who continue to wage wars. Foreign policy is not a popular, you know, has nothing to do with popular opinion. That has been just taken away from us altogether. And so now it's, you know, in this special little cloud of politicians, and those special little cloud of politicians see a lot of benefit in keeping us fighting and continuing to fight wars. And yeah, I mean, if you even just listen to Kamala, one of her campaign talks, I mean, it was constant warmongering. We're going to be the strongest, most lethal force in America. She wasn't speaking to Americans in that moment. She was speaking to moneyed interests, dare I say.
Well, David, I wanted to get at one thing that you mentioned here, the like Americans don't care about foreign policy thing. Obviously, Americans really don't like seeing images of these kids that are like blown apart every day in Gaza, these Palestinian like children and adults, and it's horrifying. I do think the state, like Courtney mentioned, like has done a very good job of insulating people from feeling like foreign policy is in their hands. Like that's an intentional design post World War II, right? But the reality is that I would argue the distinction between foreign policy and domestic policy is completely made up. And like going as far back as like the Eisenhower, you know, Cross of Iron speech and military industrial complex speech, like he made that point, like every gun that is built, every bomb that is dropped signifies a theft from those who are hungry and are not fed, those who, you know, those who are naked and need clothes. Like this world is not spending money, and like this world in arms is not spending money alone. This case that there are trade-offs to deciding to spend $2 trillion on a plane that can't fly, and then being like, we don't have any money left for name a social program. Like it is an artificial distinction, and putting it over there allows you to say that the adults are taking care of it. They know what's required to keep you safe, and like, don't worry about it. Don't really ask any more questions. Please stop asking questions. And yeah, I think people are tired of it, and they really see through it. I think there's also something to the generational thing of if you grew up like we did during the GWAT and the Iraq War, like saw how feckless and stupid and destructive these things were, and what did it give us? Like, what did it get us? Like that we can't afford to buy a home like our parents did? Like, cool. This has been worth it. Yeah. So
damn, Alex, that was a really good point. I just got to say that on air.
Well, thank you. I'll say to get much, much more of that, people should be listening to Always at War. We'll have links below. Courtney and Alex, thank you all so much. Is there anything else that people should keep their eye out for?
No, please, dear God, please listen to our show.
You have to.
So, everyone who's listening to this live on YouTube, go over and subscribe to that. We'll have the link
Beautiful.
up for all of y'all. Courtney and Alex, really appreciate talking with y'all. We'll have to do it again soon. Everyone else, take care.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, sir.
That's right, folks. Why don't you go and do that? We got the link in the chat and in the show notes below.
It's a great conversation.
It was fun. Matt, you ever heard that term GWAT? I'd never heard that before.
No, that's new to me.
I was like, oh, damn, that's clever. No, it was really great chatting with Courtney and Alex, and always fun having folks like that on who are fighting for a little bit of sanity in a really, really frightening world, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Texas update?
Matt, you ready for this? This is less of an update and more of a kind of meltdown watch. So ledge session has expired, which is always a nice day because all of the huge bombs that are about to be dropped on our head from our Republican overlords here in Texas, you at least get a short respite. Now the question is what will go through, what will be signed by the governor. There was a THC ban that did actually end up passing through the Senate and the House. And for people who don't know, Texas, through in the same way that like a lot of states sort of went through this in the past few years, as like hemp got rescheduled, certain forms of hemp that produce THC were de facto legalized, and a little bit of an industry popped up here as it did in many other states. And Dan Patrick has sort of made it his fixation. Dan Patrick is the lieutenant governor of Texas, to ban these THC products. And he, man, you're going to love this. He held this press conference the other day that was just a bizarre, over-the-top meltdown. And from what I understand from friends who are at the ledge, he didn't really make it clear what this press conference was about. It was just sort of like, big announcement. So people were like, okay, I got to check this out. And it was pure political theater. And I want us to sort of take a little bit of time and go through this here. So this first bit that we have is a video, just to be clear, because I want folks to know, this is what Dan Patrick wants you to see. This isn't what David Griscom went through and picked out. This is what Dan Patrick wants you to see here. This is a video that he put out that includes some of this press conference and then also a kind of recap that he did afterwards at his desk with all of these edibles arranged on his desk.
Look at this package. This package has 16,000 milligrams of THC. And for those of you who don't know, that's the major product in marijuana. In fact, they even say super potent, caution. On the back it says uncertain of your...
It says super kush, bro.
I mean, it's like he's the FTC all of a sudden. Like, you can't say this marketing materials. Like,
and we're not going to go super in depth on all this, folks, but I just want people to know, like, there is regulation of these products in Texas. You could argue that they should be better regulated. Hey, I think that, keeping these smoke shops away from high schools and middle schools and things like that, all for it, makes plenty of sense to me. But these things are all labeled and they are all regulated in the state of Texas by laws.
It says 21 plus. It says 21 plus right underneath his finger there.
Laws that have been passed by the body that he is in charge of, the Texas Senate.
Maybe you start with a quarter.
And also, there's going to be some tough cuts in here, and this is source material stuff.
Now, why would they say that? Because each gummy is 800 milligrams on the back of the package. The normal dose for THC, safe THC, would be 5 to 10 milligrams. This is 800 milligrams. This can kill you, but you have no idea what you're buying, and neither do your children or your young adults who are buying these products. And I need for y'all to take this story seriously.
All right, so this is the press conference.
Because does anyone want to try any of this? Would you buy anything off the shelf that you didn't know what was in it?
And again, also just to set the scene just a little bit here, this is like the busiest time in the Texas legislative session. Like everyone who's a reporter or a politician is sort of like working overtime at this point. So that's probably why there's so much kind of like dead silence.
I now worry about the baked goods coming out of California and the candy coming out of Colorado. And what's really interesting is the fact that many of these.
I just have to say, these are the people who talk about the nanny state, and they're literally saying, I'm worried about the cookies coming out of Colorado.
These are cops who are, again, excited about the opportunity to arrest folks. But yeah, and I'll tell you, I don't know if you can see, but doesn't that look like our good friend Dennis Prager standing right behind Dan Patrick if you look?
Oh, it does, yeah. He's Prager-fied.
What the lieutenant governor has here on the table, they don't allow them to be sold in their state. They just ship them to us to poison our children.
And by the way, come September.
Oh my God. It's just like the fentanyl bullshit about Canada's setting fentanyl. It's so sick to see these things, which like fentanyl overdoses or whatever, be deployed by just power-hungry freaks to give them a license.
And let's also not forget here too, and this is a little bit of a lighter segment, but like, we are on the anniversary now of Uvalde. And Dan Patrick has come out and he used a weird metaphor, but Dan Patrick has come out and said that he would literally take an arrow from the NRA, a few years back because he said we need to do something about guns. And literally one of the worst shootings that's ever happened in Texas, let alone the country, happens, and they just have done nothing. And they're spending the waning hours of this legislative session to do whatever this is. I mean, it really,
all
really
this will be
is
illegal
despicable.
anyway. So I'll be turning this over to the police before I leave here.
So by the way, like there's one I could go and buy all this stuff down the road for me right now. So it's like the whole idea that he's gonna, I don't know, just give them a bunch of free shit at the end of this.
So help educate the public on this, because you will be saving lives.
Oh, for sure.
This agave comes in from Chicago.
And I just included this because he has a lot of fun. For people who don't know, like he was a radio guy for years, talk radio in Houston. So, he knows how to, ham it up to a crowd a little bit. And I always do kind of appreciate when that side of him comes out.
THC.
But yeah, let's.
Would you drink it? Would you put it on ice? Would you mix it with alcohol? Another potentially deadly product. How about this innocent looking bag of popcorn? Again, filled with THC at very high levels. And back here, some cereal bites. All of these products designed to be good sellers for kids. Attractive packaging. It looks like a box of Pokemon cards.
Yeah, okay, man.
I want to do. Let me see.
They're everywhere, as you know. Be sure, as an adult, you're not trying these products. To prove the point today at the press conference, I asked members of the press, would anyone like to try one of these products?
I would have loved to have been there. I would have loved to have been there. I would have taken half the bag, man. I'm sorry. I'm looking at these now. These are only $30. Decent price for these Casper THC Smashers gummy, 800 milligrams, 20 count packs. A knockout dose in every bite. I don't see anything in the reviews about deadliness or deaths from these.
No, I mean it gets pretty hysterical. He gets very hysterical, and he's very much on this kick of this is poison, and not just in the way that people sort of say that alcohol or drugs or marijuana is like poison. Like no, this is like literally deadly. That's a good point, though, Matt, about how you might be interested in taking that. Because, again, it's illegal here. It's not like he had a bunch of things that are, quote-unquote, illegal in Texas. These are things you can buy. It's like bringing, a six-pack, put it on the table and say, does anyone want it? I'll be like, yes, sir.
It's a corporate product.
He did include that in the initial. We played it earlier where he says, does anybody want it? Does anybody want it? And, he edited it to make it seem like nobody wants it, but we have the actual footage of what happened when he asked if anybody wanted it.
There were no takers because they don't know what's in them. They're afraid of them, and you should be afraid. And that's why we passed SB 3 to ban all of these products and get them off of the shelves. Anybody want this bag? Catch. You want it?
So here's the...
I don't think...
Yeah, some guy raised his hand and he threw it out there. So he selectively edited his own clip to cut out the bit where he threw the product so that he could say that everybody was so afraid of these products, nobody wanted them.
I want to try one now.
Oh man, yeah. I got a couple more bits here because this was a pretty hysterical, if it's not too indulgent of me, conference. Just to show like the weight of what he was getting into, Matt. This is him talking about what he thinks is going to come next and what these kind of companies are interested in doing.
Or stay alive. Look, they're all going to file lawsuits. We know that's going to happen. These are bad actors. These are people who want to kill your kid.
Okay, so that's pretty extreme here. And, as people, again, know, like, this isn't like a mom and pop thing. This is like a regulated industry here in Texas. And in fact, a lot of the big ones in the Austin area, some of the ones that are in those videos, those products that he was holding up, are literally like kind of like veteran-owned organizations. I really want people to get this through their heads here, that the lieutenant governor of Texas said that these kind of veteran-owned THC companies have the intent of killing your children, right? And like are not just like, oh, they don't care if it happens. Like that is actually like what they are dedicated to doing and interested in doing. I mean, it is as absurd as it gets. And as you can imagine, he probably doesn't treat the media too well. I have that clip, unless you want to say something first, Matt.
I just want to jump in here. I'm looking at the Aqua Haze Ultimate Blend Blue Raz Slushy Gummies. They have an entire thing here about the analysis of it. Like, it is very clear that you have way better idea what's in these gummies than the typical
you have
food
more
that
than
you
you do with beer. I mean, the thing of these is like, so every single one of those has not only the amount of THC or CBD in them, all that stuff that you showed, that frankly I don't understand, I'll admit, and also the calories. And what else goes in there? The allergens, right? Which, by the way, you don't have to do with beer, right? You don't have to do that. I mean, every beer just has like how much alcohol in it. It doesn't have to go through everything that's in there. So these are actually more transparent than beer and wine. Let me show you, though, how he reacted to a very famous reporter here who just asked him a kind of simple question. Because as you know, and as anybody who's been around any of these kind of conversations about like marijuana, again, we're talking about like this Delta 9 stuff, this THC that is derived from hemp. So it's like magnitudes for the most part, like weaker than like the real like flower that you'll get in places that have legalized weed. But if you're familiar with these conversations, you've heard a million times where people who have chronic pain, have suffered from opioid addiction, all these other things, like use these things medicinally to help them sleep, to help them deal with pain. And it was something that a lot of people testified about here in Texas. And they're talking about some kind of compromise where they will extend some of the compassionate use medical exemptions for this kind of thing. If you have shown that you have been on opioids for 90 days, just an absurd bar and hurdle to create. We have a very, very limited medical usage in this state. And these are like kind of normal folks, everyday folks who are, probably not big time libs or anything like that, who are saying, hey, I need to be able to use this to go to sleep, to be able to deal with my kind of pain. So it's exceptionally cruel. And this journalist here, Jeremy Wallace, asks that kind of basic question. And just watch how angry Dan Patrick
I understand wanting to protect children, but you have grown adults who are using these products too. Is there a way to do this where grown adults could still have access to these products?
We don't want adults having this either. What are you, crazy? You want to go home and eat a bag of this tonight? See if you're here tomorrow? This is what we focus on, kids, because that's where they built the shops. But adults are buying this stuff too. Make no mistake. We want to protect the 20 and the 30 and the 40 and the 50-year-olds too. We don't want anybody buying anything off the shelf that could kill them or ruin their mental state for the rest of their lives. The young man who was 22, who stepped in front of a train after he ate some of this junk,
I'm sorry. How many drunk driving accidents are there in Texas every fucking night? Like, this is a ridiculous standard. That, we have to protect adults from doing something because they might step in front of a train. Oh my God.
He wasn't a kid. He was an adult. That's crazy talk. That's the kind of talk, the reason why we're here.
He's a
Media
kid.
that would say something as stupid as that. I'm sorry.
Okay, these
it's
are
just true.
questions so that we can hear you say those.
So anyway, that's the that's Lieutenant Governor of Texas, and just a couple quick notes. I think it's less than this is from the Texas Tribune. Less than a third of Texans think that there should be stricter regulation on THC products in Texas. So this has nothing to do with representing the voters or doing anything other than sort of grinding an axe that Dan Patrick has had for years now. This is somebody who is in as much power as he probably ever will be. This legislative session was just a devastating one for working class people in Texas. They are waging war on their freedom of speech, on the working class as a whole, all while poisoning and destroying our environment and our water systems here. So this is what he was interested in doing, and big time THC meltdown for Mr. Dan Patrick.
And I mean, just insanely counterproductive to me because, like, Louisiana, they just passed the anti-chemtrail thing, but it's like, who really gives a shit about that? It's just fantasy land anyway. You get in the way of people and their medicinals and things they rely on chemically as part of their habit. I think people, like a lot of people are. I mean, you mentioned Dana Loesch was pissed off about
threw a hissy fit about it. A lot of people do go on any of the Reddits in the state of Texas, and it's just guys being like, "I love Trump and I support the Republicans from the pussy Democrats, but this is not Texas values." And it's like, no, this is like exactly the kind of free control that these guys have always wanted. and you guys,
where have you been?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be a pessimist, as folks know. I'm very politically optimistic. But I just don't think that like we're going to get where we need to go from like bad things happening to people. I think that people sort of suffer through things.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. I mean, it's definitely a good point to make to folks to maybe sort of, move people a little bit. Because again, these aren't popular programs. These aren't things that folks want to see. And the thing that's so funny to me about that video is like everybody in that room has to know that this is absurd. To have the police and the whole thing's way longer, obviously. And all of those cops got up and just told these bizarre stories about these THC products. So.
You know how hard it is to get those fucking bags open? Like those are the half ounce I just bought at the legal store. Like it's all childproof. I still haven't figured out a system because I only do it like once every like 3 weeks, once every month. That like how you have to pull open the Ziploc. Kids are not overdosing. Find me one child who has overdosed to death on weed here, and I mean I bet there's not one.
Yeah, I mean, well, the bigger thing is it's just like if you're worried, if like you're worried about these things, regulate the industry, right? I mean, this isn't going to do very much. I mean,
it's going to be a boon to cartels and like people who run drugs across states.
Look,
yeah,
we live, we're like in between everything now, so it just moves money out of the state. And it's one of those things that people have always said, Texas probably will, legalize marijuana once they realize how much money they can make. They just don't care about that kind of thing at this point. If anything has been made abundantly clear to me in my adult life, is that the Republican Party of Texas is operating under a different kind of playbook because they are emboldened and in power, and they have plenty of rich donors to sort of back them. Why the fuck they need some tax money from marijuana sales? We have a $30 billion budget surplus in Texas. Every time you see a hungry person or a homeless person, think that there's just money sitting there because these guys don't want to invest in this state.
Yeah, Mika girlfriend here. Oh no, weed gummies obviously a bigger health than air pollution, PFAS, and microplastics. Yeah, it's just great. It's great being so protected as my balls are full of microplastics.
That's why they're getting bigger.
Don't get me started on the new non-steroidal steroids that are coming out. Get jacked in 3 years.
It's filled with plastic and Delta 9, baby. Well, folks, I mean, we got a lot we want to get to in the postgame. Do we want to do this Jones on before or after?
I think Jones, you're gonna have to join us in the postgame. We got Alex Jones. I mean, there have been some low moments. Obviously, lying on kids massacred in a school. That's a nadir, I think, the English
Nick
department would have you
Fuentes,
say.
Kanye West.
Yeah, that stuff. But literally caping for the sort of deep state takeover by intelligence services in terms of like actually Palantir is a bit of a nothing burger. That is a pretty big descent, in my opinion. Yeah, he's got the documents here, and actually, it's an invoice from Peter Thiel.
We got the documents right here, folks. You'll get that over patreon.com/leftreckoning. Thank you so much to Alex and Courtney. Y'all check out Always at War, and come join us at the post game. We'll be over there in just a couple minutes.